Before diving into the video, did you know that over 80% of you watching right now aren't subscribed? Your one like and one subscribe means the absolute world to this channel and helps us keep going. Hit those buttons real quick, and let's get into the video. Chapter 1. The Public Betrayal. The celebration party on the top floor of the hotel didn't feel much like a celebration at all. Arthur walked up to Cynthia and Julian, his eyes fixed on them. The blush on Cynthia's face faded, replaced by the calm, composed expression Arthur knew all too well. She gently patted the back of Julian's hand, signaling for him to wait, then stepped toward Arthur. "Leo," she said in a lowered voice, "I'll explain everything later. This isn't the place for this conversation." "Then what is the right place?" Leo asked. "Was it 10 years ago when we were crammed into that leaking apartment, splitting a single cup of instant noodles? Or 5 years ago when the company went bankrupt and you held on to me, crying, saying, 'Leo, it's just us now'?" With every sentence, Cynthia's face turned a shade paler. Julian frowned and stepped forward half a pace, suddenly positioning himself in front of her like some kind of protector. "President Vance." "Julian, shut up." Leo didn't even look at him. His gaze remained locked on Cynthia. "I'm asking her." Cynthia took a deep breath and met his eyes directly. There was no softness left in them now, only resolve. "Leo Vance, I've told you before, you will always be the most important person to me, the one I trust the most." Her voice was clear and steady, the same tone she used in board meetings. "But some positions aren't yours just because you stayed the longest or because you suffer together. Julian can give me a more stable future, a more respectable life, and our marriage will also benefit the group's next stage of expansion." Leo almost laughed from sheer disbelief. Every word she said drove straight into the softest part of his heart. He remembered all those late nights when she'd fall asleep against his shoulder and he would stare at her exhausted face, silently swearing that one day he'd give her the best life possible. He remembered the times clients mocked her background and family status, and how she'd come back secretly wiping away tears. He had held her hand and told her that someday they would stand so high that everyone else would have no choice but to look up at them. Turns out the best he fought to build for her still wasn't respectable enough in her eyes. Turns out the future he offered couldn't compare to a strategic marriage. At that moment, Julian wrapped an arm around Cynthia's shoulders and spoke with the unmistakable tone of a winner. "President Vance, everyone remembers the bond you and Cynthia built while starting the company together. The group will still need you moving forward. As for everything else, I hope you can understand and give us your blessing." "Blessing?" Leo looked at the hand resting on Cynthia's shoulder, looked at the way she leaned slightly toward him, and suddenly let out a quiet laugh. The sound felt jarringly out of place in the suddenly silent ballroom. "Good. Really good." He nodded and took a step back, his gaze slowly moving from Cynthia's face to Julian, then across the surrounding crowd filled with awkwardness and curiosity. "Cynthia, I spent 10 years beside you, from having absolutely nothing to ringing the bell at the IPO. So tell me, what exactly was I to you?" Cynthia pressed her lips together tightly. After a long silence, she finally gave the answer that froze his heart completely. "You are my most trusted business partner, the other half of Apex Group that can never be replaced. But Julian," she paused, her tone firm, "is the person most suited to stand beside me for the rest of my life." So that was it. 10 years of passion, sacrifice, sleepless nights, and standing by each other through hell and back. In the end, the label she filed it all under was simply business partner. Leo stared at her and suddenly felt that everything was absurd. So absurd that he no longer even had the strength to be angry. All that remained was an endless emptiness and coldness. He nodded once without saying another word. He turned and walked toward the exit of the ballroom. Behind him came Julian's hushed attempt to comfort her and Cynthia's quiet sigh. Chapter 2. Activating the Contingency. Leo stepped into the elevator, shutting that suffocating sea of luxury and glittering lights behind him completely. The elevator descended and the sensation of weightlessness hit. He leaned against the cold metal wall of the cabin, head tilted back as he watched the floor numbers flicker downward. 10 years of memories rewound through his mind like a broken film reel. Her face illuminated by the dim lights of a rundown neighborhood while eating instant noodles. The night they landed their first major contract, crying and laughing together in the middle of an empty street at midnight. The financial crisis when they mortgaged everything they owned and clung to each other in fear. And finally tonight, her arm wrapped around another man as she announced her engagement. That unfamiliar expression on her face, shy, soft, certain, the look of a woman completely devoted to someone. Suddenly, Leo's stomach twisted violently. He bent over and dry heaved, but nothing came out. Only bitter acid burned its way through his throat. The elevator reached the lobby, the doors opened, and he straightened up, adjusted his crooked tie, and strode out into the freezing wind. His driver, Thomas, pulled the car over the moment he saw his face. Thomas froze in alarm. "President Vance, you." "Take me back to the apartment," Leo said, opening the car door and getting in. "But the company—" "Miss Cynthia just called." Leo closed his eyes and cut him off. "Take me back to the apartment." The car merged into traffic as the dazzling city lights streamed past outside the window. This city, the one they had spent 10 years conquering, now felt unbearably foreign and cold. He pulled out his phone. The screen still showed his chat history with Cynthia from last night. Her final message read, "After tomorrow, everything's going to be a brand new beginning. Fighting my President Vance. A brand new beginning." Yeah, brand new indeed. He turned off the screen and said to Thomas in the front seat, "Pull over." Thomas obeyed immediately. Leo pushed open the door and walked toward the riverside railing. The river was dark and endless, reflecting the brilliant skyline across the water. The shattered ripples of light looked just like his heart right now. 10 years. He had gone from a broke construction worker, sleeping under bridges, to the chairman of a publicly listed company worth billions. He gave the woman he loved everything he could offer: fame, status, wealth, and the entirety of his sincerity, his future, his heart without reservation. And at the brightest moment of his life, she personally shoved him off the cliff, then stood at the edge beside the man who was more suitable, smiling and waving goodbye. The river wind was merciless, slicing across his face like knives. Leo pulled out a cigarette pack, shook one loose, and lit it. The ember glowed red in the darkness. Halfway through the cigarette, he took out his phone and dialed a number he rarely contacted. It rang 3 times before someone picked up. "Mr. Vance." The man's voice was calm and steady. "Marcus." Leo took another drag, watching the smoke scatter into the wind. "The insurance policy I asked you to prepare in secret 3 years ago, is it still there?" There was a 2-second silence on the other end. "It's been maintained the entire time, just as instructed. Deep dormant status, isolated contact chain, absolute confidentiality. Activated." Leo stared at the lights glowing from the top floor of the Apex Group headquarters across the river and slowly spoke. "Now, Chapter 3, Setting the Trap." Leo crushed the cigarette under his shoe, his fingertips turning pale from the force. "One more thing. Dig into 2 people, Cynthia and Julian. I want every communication record, every money transfer, every private meeting, every project they've touched in the last 3 months." He paused, his voice growing colder. "No, the last 6 months. The more detailed, the better." "Understood," Marcus replied evenly. "The activation order will be issued tonight. You'll have the files by tomorrow evening at the latest." His voice remained perfectly calm, as though he had merely received an ordinary business instruction. Only he and Leo knew what this so-called insurance policy really was. 4 years ago, Leo had secretly set it up behind Cynthia's back under his own name. At the time, it came from an instinctive distrust buried deep inside him, or perhaps a fear of how easily human nature bends in the face of massive interest. He had hired Marcus, one of the top experts in corporate intelligence and risk control, and through completely independent funding and channels, quietly planted people absolutely loyal to Leo in several of the group's most critical positions. They never participated in day-to-day operations. They only reported abnormalities to Leo at fixed intervals, a deeply buried corporate immune system. He never thought he would actually need to use it. At one point, he even believed he was simply being paranoid. How could Cynthia ever betray him? They clawed their way out of hell together. But reality had delivered the hardest slap imaginable. And another thing, Leo added, his voice as cold as the river wind. Starting tomorrow, suspend all Apex Group fund transfers requiring my final approval. Any documents needing my signature, hold them all. Use the excuse that I'm unwell and need complete rest. Marcus paused briefly. Mr. Vance, this will trigger serious instability inside the group, especially right after the IPO. It's a highly sensitive period. Then let it shake. Leo cut him off. And one more thing. Compile the gambling agreement we hold on Zenith Tech and the evidence of Cynthia privately investing in the Blue Horizon project through offshore shell companies. Organize everything and anonymously send it to the Securities Regulatory Commission and the Commercial Investigation Division. Monday morning, 9 o'clock sharp, right when they start work. Zenith Tech was the golden project Cynthia had pushed aggressively for. The risk-sharing agreement tied to it was dangerously reckless. If exposed, it would be enough to send Apex Group's stock price crashing. As for the Blue Horizon project, that was a private cash cow she had hidden from the board entirely. The illegal fund movements and backdoor dealings involved were enough to bury her in scandal. All of it were safeguards Leo had secretly kept while cleaning up her messes over the years. Back then, he truly believed he would never need to use them. On the other end of the line, Marcus's breathing seemed to grow slightly heavier for a brief moment before returning to normal. Understood. I'll handle it immediately. After hanging up, Leo remained by the river for a long time, until the cold numbed his hands and feet completely. When he finally returned to the apartment, he took a freezing shower. The icy water poured over his body, but it couldn't wash away the wildfire of rage and the bone-deep pain twisting together inside him. He sat alone before the floor-to-ceiling windows in the empty living room, watching the city lights gradually go dark as dawn's pale gray light spread across the sky. The skyscraper they had spent 10 years building had collapsed in a single moment. Chapter 4. The Public Confrontation. At dawn, Leo changed into a pure black suit and tied a dark crimson tie Cynthia had never seen before. President Vance, where to? Thomas's voice was as steady as ever. To the company, Leo fastened his cufflinks, his tone calm. We're attending the morning executive meeting. The atmosphere inside the top-floor conference room of Apex Group was heavy. The massive oval conference table was filled with senior executives and major shareholders. Cynthia sat at the head of the table. Julian was there too, seated to her left in a chair that used to remain empty. The moment Leo walked in, every gaze in the room shifted toward him at once. Surprise, curiosity, suspicion. Cynthia looked up at him as if she wanted to say something. Leo ignored it completely and walked straight to the opposite end of the table, taking his seat directly across from her. Let's begin. Leo opened the folder in front of me, his voice utterly emotionless. The meeting proceeded routinely as each department reported on post-IPO operations, but everyone could tell the people who truly mattered weren't focused on the reports at all. Finally, the CFO hesitantly began discussing liquidity. President Cynthia, President Leo, regarding the second payment for the overseas acquisition. Postpone it. Without even looking up, Leo cut him off. The conference room instantly fell silent. Cynthia frowned and turned toward him. Leo, we already agreed on the payment schedule with the other party. Delaying it could damage our credibility and even cause the acquisition to collapse. Then let it collapse. Leo closed the folder and raised his eyes to meet hers. At this stage, the group needs to preserve liquidity to handle post-listing market volatility. All non-essential large expenditures are suspended. That's my decision. But this acquisition was approved by the board. Her voice sharpened with irritation. I'm the chairman, Leo answered flatly. I have veto power. Or does Cynthia think this business partner no longer has the right to speak on company decisions? Cynthia's face turned pale. Clearly, She hadn't expected him to confront her so directly in public. Under the table, Julian gently squeezed her hand before speaking in his usual mild tone. President Vance makes a fair point. Stability should come first during the early IPO phase. Cynthia, perhaps we should reevaluate the risks. Leo looked at the hand resting over hers, then suddenly smiled. And in what capacity is Mr. Julian attending Apex Group's senior executive meeting? A shareholder? A board member? Or, he paused slightly, Cynthia's fiancé? The smile on Julian's face stiffened instantly. Cynthia abruptly stood up. Leo, do you really have to do this? Julian is he's just here to learn, right? Leo finished the sentence for her, leaning back in his chair. He slowly swept his gaze across the room. Everyone, allow me to introduce Mr. Julian. He is Cynthia's newly engaged fiancé. He'll likely become more involved in group affairs moving forward. You should all get acquainted in advance. A wave of suppressed gasps and whispers spread through the conference room. Clearly, not everyone had known beforehand, or perhaps they knew, but never expected Leo to expose it like this. Cynthia's chest rose and fell sharply as she stared at him. Her eyes were filled with disappointment, anger, and a trace of grievance Leo could no longer understand. Leo, we'll talk privately. She practically forced the words through clenched teeth. Fine. Leo stood up. Meeting adjourned. Then he looked directly at her. Cynthia, my office. Now, Chapter 5, Strictly Business. Leo's office was on the other side of the hallway, slightly smaller than hers, but with a far better view. He walked inside without sitting down, simply standing before the floor-to-ceiling windows with his back facing the door. Cynthia followed him in and shut the door behind her. What exactly are you trying to do? Her voice carried both exhaustion and anger. That acquisition is critical for our expansion into the European market. You know that better than anyone. And what you did to Julian during the meeting, you completely humiliated him. The kickback you privately promised the middleman for that acquisition deal, Leo didn't turn around as he spoke. Was it 5% or 8%? The room instantly fell silent behind him. Slowly, Leo turned around. Cynthia stood frozen by the door, her face drained of color as though she'd just been punched head-on. How do you know that? Her voice trembled slightly. How I know isn't important. Leo walked behind his desk and sat down like an interrogator. What matters is this, Cynthia. When did you start learning to use the company's money to pave the road for yourself? For that perfectly suitable fiancé of yours? I didn't. Cynthia hurried toward the desk, both hands bracing against its edge, her eyes already reddening. That kickback is standard industry practice, and the company would have benefited in the end. Leo, believe me, I never intended to harm the group. We built this company together. Together? Leo repeated the word slowly, finding it unbearably ironic. Cynthia, the moment you walked into that banquet holding Julian's arm and announced your engagement, there stopped being an us. There's only you and me and your Julian. So this really is about that. It was as if she had finally found the core issue, and her emotions surged instantly. Fine, I admit I handled it badly. I should have told you earlier. But Leo, we've been together for 10 years. 10 whole years. Doesn't what we have matter more than a marriage certificate? Marrying Julian is simply the most suitable choice. You'll always be the most important person in my life. We can still stay the way we always were. The way we always were. Leo cut her off, his voice colder than ice. Watching you go home every night to sleep beside another man. Watching the two of you appear everywhere together while the whole world blesses your marriage. And meanwhile, I continue being your most important partner, working myself to death for you, making money for you, protecting your empire and your perfect marriage. He stood up and walked toward her, staring directly into her eyes. He asked, word by word, Cynthia, what exactly do you take me for? A dog? One you can summon whenever you want, throw away whenever you're done, and one that'll still guard your house and wag its tail for you afterward. No, how could you think that? Tears finally spilled down her face. What we have is love, family, a bond beyond any label or form. Why do you insist on measuring everything through marriage? Why can't you understand me? I need a more stable, more respectable marriage. Is that wrong? Does that really have to change what exists between us? Understand you? Leo let out a low laugh filled with exhaustion and bitterness. Cynthia, I understand you far too well. You always knew exactly what I wanted. That's why you dared to hurt me this recklessly. Because you were certain that no matter what you did, I would understand you, support you, forgive you, and stay beside you like a loyal dog forever. Isn't that right? No. Cynthia shook her head desperately, tears streaming down her cheeks. Leo, don't do this. Can we just talk properly like we used to? Used to? Leo took a step back, widening the distance between them as if she carried some contagious disease. Cynthia, there's no used to anymore. The Leo from before died the moment you announced your engagement at that celebration banquet. The man standing in front of you now is Apex Group's chairman, your business partner, and the enemy who is about to tear apart your perfect marriage and everything the two of you want. Cynthia's entire body trembled. She stared at him in disbelief. Enemy? You said enemy? She repeated weakly, all color gone from her face. Yes. Leo looked at her expressionlessly. Enemy. So save your tears and save that nonsense about love transcending labels. From this day forward, it's strictly business. He walked back behind his desk and pressed the intercom button. Secretary, escort Mr. Julian out of the Apex Group building. He is not an employee. Without authorization, he is prohibited from entering executive office areas. And if he refuses to cooperate, call security. Chapter 6. Digging up the rot. Leo. Cynthia screamed. Leo hung up the intercom and looked at her calmly. Cynthia, if there's nothing else, please return to your office. As for the acquisition payment suspension, I'll have the risk control department issue a new evaluation report. Until that report is completed, all funds remain frozen. That is the final decision. Cynthia stared at him intensely, her chest rising and falling violently. Those eyes that once held his entire world were now filled with shock, anger, hurt, and something painfully unfamiliar. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, no words came out. She spun around abruptly, yanked open the door, and stormed out. The door slammed shut behind her with a deafening bang. Leo remained standing motionless until the sound of her footsteps disappeared down the hallway. A few minutes later, the internal line rang. The secretary's cautious voice came through. President Vance, Julian has already left the building. However, President Cynthia is very upset. She returned to her office and hasn't come out since. Also, Director Wong from Finance and Director Lee from Investments came by earlier. They seem to want to speak with you. I'm not seeing anyone. Leo cut her off. If anyone comes looking for me, tell them I'm unwell and need complete rest. All documents requiring my signature are to be held. Urgent matters can be handled through email. Yes, President Vance. After hanging up, Leo sat back down and opened his laptop. The cold blue glow of the screen illuminated his face. Marcus's email was already waiting silently in his inbox. Attached were summaries of nearly every communication record, financial transaction, and overlapping travel itinerary involving Cynthia and Julian over the past 6 months. The evidence was horrifying. So they had reconnected as early as half a year ago, perhaps even earlier. Those so-called business trips, college reunions, and meetings with investors she mentioned, Julian had been present for many of them. Julian's family business had recently been suffering from severe cash flow problems, and through a series of complex operations, Cynthia had been quietly funneling Apex Group's premium resources and liquidity toward them. That acquisition deal was likely just one piece of the plan. So this was her definition of suitable, of stable and respectable, of beneficial to the group. Nothing more than a carefully calculated exchange of interest and a merciless betrayal of the 10 years he gave her sincerely. He moved the mouse and opened another encrypted folder. Inside was everything Marcus had secretly gathered over the years regarding Cynthia's gray area business dealings, along with the dirty secrets and leverage tied to several key shareholders and executives within the group. Once upon a time, These files were meant to be Cynthia's shield, her safety net. Now, they had become the sharpest blades in his hands. Leo took a deep breath and began typing. The first email went to several veteran shareholders who had long been dissatisfied with Cynthia's aggressive investment strategies. Attached were preliminary screenshots proving irregularities within the project operations. The second order went to one of his embedded insurance operatives inside the finance department. He was instructed to launch a secret audit into every major fund transfer Cynthia had handled, with special focus on transactions connected to Julian's family business. The third call was placed to the overseas law firm that had worked closely with them for years under Leo's personal name. He commissioned them to re-examine the risk-sharing agreement with Zenith Tech to uncover every possible legal loophole and exposure point. He knew it would take time, but corporate warfare wasn't like gang shootouts. There were no gunshots, no blood splattered across the floor, yet it was every bit as deadly, every bit as cruel. He needed patience. He wanted the traitors to watch everything they had built begin rotting from the inside out. He wanted Cynthia to understand the price of throwing away someone's genuine heart, and he wanted Julian to learn that some things were never his to touch. Chapter 7. The Inferno begins. Over the next few days, dangerous undercurrents spread through the entire group. Using medical leave as an excuse, Leo almost completely disappeared from public view. Every instruction was issued either through email or Marcus's private channels. Cynthia tried several times to speak with him. Each attempt was blocked by one excuse or another. She raised objections during board meetings, but several veteran shareholders who had received Leo's emails suddenly adopted ambiguous attitudes. And with his chairman veto power still intact, every proposal she pushed forward ended in failure. The effects of the frozen funds soon became obvious. Several key projects stalled, partners and investors began voicing complaints. And after the brief surge following the IPO, Apex Group's stock price started showing signs of instability. Cynthia had clearly realized something was wrong. She began using her authority as CEO to bypass Leo and move funds independently. But the people embedded in the insurance network quietly blocked her at every turn. She privately approached several shareholders. The responses she received were vague and evasive. She even tried contacting Leo through his personal number. Long messages flooded in one after another, from reminiscing about the past to angry accusations, and finally pleading, "Leo, can we meet and talk properly? Please, let's stop hurting each other like this. What exactly do you want? Just tell me. If it's something I can do, I'll do it. Don't destroy the company we spent 10 years building, please." Leo read every message, then expressionlessly deleted them and blocked her number. Hurting each other? When you stab a knife into someone's heart while smiling at them, how can you still ask why they're bleeding? 1 week later, Marcus finally sent word. The critical loopholes in the Zenith Tech gambling agreement had been identified, and the evidence chain was nearly complete. At the same time, the anonymous reports regarding Cynthia's illegal involvement in the Blue Horizon project had already been delivered through special channels, landing directly on the desks of both the Securities Regulatory Commission and a notoriously ruthless investigator within the Commercial Investigation Division. The report intentionally avoids direct evidence. Marcus explained over the encrypted call, but the direction is extremely clear. It's enough to trigger a formal investigation. Once the investigation begins, Apex Group's stock price will inevitably plunge. As the primary person responsible, Cynthia will at minimum face an internal investigation. She could even be temporarily suspended. And once the investigation expands, it'll inevitably drag in Julian's family business. With their current cash flow problems, they probably won't survive any major turbulence. Good. Leo stared out at the gloomy sky beyond the windows. Add more fuel to the fire. Leak information to several influential financial media outlets. Suggest that Julian's family business has been trying to siphon Apex Group resources through Cynthia and shift their financial risks onto us. No hard proof, just enough implication. Understood. Marcus paused briefly before continuing. One more thing, Mr. Vance. The people watching Julian reported that he recently met privately with representatives from Radiant Capital. It appears he's seeking new financing to deal with his family company's crisis. And Radiant, they've always been interested in the East District land parcel we previously secured. Radiant Capital, our old rival. Leo's voice turned icy. Find a way to let Cynthia accidentally discover those meetings. Have it leak through someone close to her. Make it sound unintentional. Yes, sir. After hanging up, Leo walked to the liquor cabinet and poured himself another drink. Chapter 8. The Falling Wall. The plan was moving forward step by step. Leo should have felt satisfied, thrilled by revenge, but he didn't. Inside him, there was only a cold, endless emptiness. 10 years. More than 3,000 days and nights. Those memories couldn't simply be erased. The days they survived on stale bread together, the nights they slept on the office floor, the moments they held each other for warmth while standing at the edge of despair. Those moments of genuine warmth had once truly existed, and now they repeatedly stabbed into a heart that was already torn apart beyond repair. He hated her so much his bones fell cold, but he also... No, he couldn't think about that anymore. Once the arrow leaves the bow, there's no turning back. A few more days passed, then the storm finally began showing its true power. First came a vaguely worded report in a financial weekly magazine, mentioning that a newly listed star company was suspected of internal tunneling of benefits, with the related parties involving another cash-strapped family business. No names were mentioned, but anyone inside the industry immediately knew who it referred to. Soon after, officials from the Securities Regulatory Commission and the Commercial Investigation Division made a routine visit to Apex Group. Though it was only a preliminary inquiry, word spread instantly. Panic began growing inside the company, and the stock price plunged accordingly. At last, Cynthia could no longer sit still. She rushed directly to the apartment building where Leo lived. After security stopped her, she stood downstairs screaming his name, her voice laced with desperation. Leo stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at that tiny, frantic figure below. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup ruined. None of the elegance and composure she once carried remained. She looked like nothing more than an ordinary woman with nowhere left to go. Once upon a time, she had been the person he wanted to protect most in this world. Now, he was the one who had personally driven her to this point. He watched for a long time, until she finally lost strength and was forcibly dragged away by Julian, who had rushed over after hearing the news. Before leaving, Julian looked up toward Leo's window. His eyes were dark and venomous, filled with hatred. Leo closed the curtains. That night, he received a text from an unfamiliar number. It was Cynthia. "Leo, do you really hate me this much? So much that you're willing to destroy everything we built together with our own hands?" Something happened on Julian's side. His father had a heart attack from stress and was hospitalized. "Are you satisfied now? What exactly will it take for you to stop?" Leo stared at the message. In his mind appeared her hysterical expression and Julian's poisonous gaze. Satisfied? No, not even close. He replied with a single phrase, "Break it off." Then he blocked the number again. Break off the engagement. End things with Julian. That was the last and only chance he was willing to give her, though he already knew she would never accept it. Her pride, her obsession with respectability and the right choice, the cost she had already invested, and perhaps even the lingering feeling she still had for Julian, none of it would allow her to back down. As expected, no response ever came. Fine. A few days later, an even bigger explosion hit. First, the details of Zenith Tech's valuation adjustment agreement were deeply analyzed by a certain influential financial blogger who pointed out the enormous hidden risks and unequal terms within it, directly accusing Apex Group's investment department of negligence and even suggesting possible exchanges of benefits. Apex's stock price plunged again immediately. Afterward, rumors about Cynthia's irregular operations in the Blue Horizon project and her suspected improper transfer of benefits spread like wildfire. Although there was no official solid proof, it was enough to make investors vote with their feet. Pressure inside the board of directors reached a breaking point. Several veteran shareholders jointly demanded an emergency meeting to discuss Cynthia's position as CEO. Meanwhile, over at Julian's family business, after Radiant Capital accidentally leaked news that they were desperately seeking financing and were even willing to sell off-core technologies, their already fragile supply chain collapsed completely. Banks began aggressively demanding repayment. Partners turned against them one after another, and the company was now on the verge of total ruin. And Julian's father, according to the rumors, really had suffered a stroke from rage and was now in the ICU. When the wall collapses, everyone rushes forward to push it down harder. And Leo simply watched the inferno he had personally ignited consume everything they once treasured, little by little. Chapter 9. The Cornered Animal. Late that night, the doorbell to Leo's apartment started ringing frantically. Standing outside was Julian. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair a mess, his suit wrinkled beyond recognition. The refined and elegant image he usually carried was completely gone now. He looked like a wild animal cornered, with nowhere left to run. "Leo, you fucking psycho bastard." The moment the door opened, he tried to charge inside, but Thomas and another bodyguard immediately restrained him. Leo leaned against the doorway and looked at him coldly. "Need something? Was it you? Was all of this you?" Julian roared, veins bulging from his forehead. "The whistleblower letter, the media leaks, and Radiant Capital. That was all you, wasn't it? You're trying to destroy Cynthia, destroy Apex, destroy my family too, you scheming piece of shit. If you've got the guts, come at me directly." "Come at you directly?" Leo laughed softly, though there wasn't a trace of warmth in it. "Julian, I think you misunderstand something. From beginning to end, I was never targeting you. You and Cynthia's greed destroyed yourselves. Tell me, which part of those reports was false? Did Cynthia illegally manipulate the Blue Horizon project or not? Did your family try to siphon resources out of Apex through her or not? And wasn't that gambling agreement with Zenith Tech a ticking time bomb from the start? All I did was drag your actions into the light." Julian was left speechless. He could only glare at Leo viciously while breathing heavily. "As for you," Leo stepped closer, his gaze icy as it swept across him. "A useless rich kid who's never accomplished anything on his own, a man who survives by exploiting women's feelings and resources. You really think someone like you is worth me personally targeting?" Julian completely lost control. He struggled violently, but the bodyguards held him firmly in place. "Leo, don't get too smug," he screamed hoarsely. "The person Cynthia loves is me. The one she chose is me. Even if you destroy everything, you'll still never get her. You'll always be a loser, a pathetic man she abandoned." The words hit like a poison knife, driving directly into the deepest wound inside Leo. The muscles in his face twitched slightly, but only for a moment. Then calm returned. "Love." Leo repeated the word slowly, his tone dripping with mockery. "Julian, do you and she really have something as precious as love between you? She chose you because you satisfy the pathetic inferiority buried deep inside her. And you chose her because you wanted Apex Group and the lifeline your family desperately needed." He looked at him coldly. "You really are perfect for each other." Leo waved his hand dismissively, signaling for the bodyguards to drag him away. "Throw him out, and from now on, don't let him come anywhere near this place again. Leo, you won't die peacefully. You'll get what's coming to you." Julian's curses echoed through the hallway before gradually fading into the distance. Leo shut the door, then slowly slid down against the cold surface until he was sitting on the floor. Sharp pain pulsed violently from where his heart should have been. Loser. Pathetic. He was right. When it came to love, Leo had lost completely, utterly. But soon enough, the pain was swallowed once again by something colder. Hatred. He would not remain a pathetic fool forever. He would become the man who personally brought all of this to its end. Chapter 10. The Ouster. A few days later, Apex Group convened an emergency board meeting. Leo attended. It was his first public appearance since the scandal erupted. The atmosphere in the conference room was so suffocating it felt tangible. Every director and senior executive was present. Cynthia sat across from him, her face pale, heavy dark circles shadowing her eyes. Yet her back remained perfectly straight, as if she were desperately clinging to the last shred of dignity she had left. Julian wasn't there. He wasn't qualified to attend. The meeting went straight to the heart of the matter, whether Cynthia should remain CEO and how the company should respond to the current crisis. Several veteran shareholders struck first, their words sharp and merciless. They directly accused Cynthia of a string of disastrous decisions and suspected violations that had caused enormous losses and a devastating reputational crisis for the group. They demanded her immediate resignation and a full internal investigation. Cynthia fought back fiercely, shifting part of the blame onto market conditions and claiming that some of the issues stemmed from malicious attacks and internal sabotage. Her gaze swept toward Leo several times, burning with anger and accusation. Leo remained silent the entire time, lightly tapping his fingers against the table until everyone had finished speaking. "I agree with Director Wong and Director Lee," Leo finally spoke. His voice was calm, not loud, yet the entire conference room fell silent instantly. Cynthia's head snapped toward him, her pupils shrinking in disbelief, unable to believe he would actually say those words himself. As CEO, Cynthia's recent actions have indeed caused immeasurable losses and risks to the group. Before the Securities Commission and the Commercial Crime Bureau reach their final conclusions, and in order to stabilize the situation and reassure investors, I propose that all of Miss Cynthia's CEO duties be suspended immediately, with Vice President Chun serving as acting CEO temporarily. At the same time, the group will establish an independent investigation team to conduct a thorough inquiry into all related matters. He finished in one breath, his tone completely professional. "Leo," Cynthia shot to her feet, her voice trembling with emotion. "How dare you? Why do you have to do this? Apex Group was built by the two of us together. Without me, there would be no Apex today. Because I am the chairman, and I hold the largest voting shares." Leo raised his eyes and looked at her calmly, his gaze as cold as if he were staring at a stranger. "And because your actions right now are destroying the Apex that we built together, Cynthia, separating business from personal matters. That's what you taught me. Separating business from personal matters." Cynthia laughed. The sound was sharp, desperate, almost broken. "Leo, you're only doing this because I chose Julian instead of you, aren't you? You're getting revenge. You're using these dirty tactics to destroy me. You ruined me, ruined Apex. What exactly do you gain from this?" "I gain justice." Leo met her nearly furious gaze and answered word by word. "I gain accountability to the shareholders, the employees, and this company we built. As for you and Julian," he paused, his eyes sweeping across the room, "that is your private matter. It has nothing to do with this board meeting." In the end, the proposal went to a vote. Under Leo's leadership and with the support of several veteran board members, the motion passed by an overwhelming majority. Cynthia was immediately suspended from her position as CEO and ordered to cooperate with the investigation. It was as if all the strength had been drained from her body. She collapsed back in her chair, her face deathly pale, unable to say another word. After the meeting adjourned and everyone had left, only the two of us remained, separated by the long, empty conference table. Slowly, she lifted her head to look at him. Her eyes were bloodshot, but there were no tears left in them now, only barren hatred. "Leo, you won." Her voice was painfully hoarse. "I never wanted to compete with you." Leo stood up and adjusted his suit jacket. "You were the one who turned us into a war." "Why?" she murmured softly, as if asking him, or perhaps asking herself. "How do we end up like this? We were supposed to." "There is no us anymore. Cynthia." Leo cut her off, his voice carrying nothing but exhaustion and cold finality. "From now on, you are you, and I am me. I will take over Apex Group. As for you and Julian, take care of yourselves." After saying that, he didn't look at her again. He turned and walked toward the door. "Leo," she called out behind him, her voice shrill with despair. Leo never stopped walking. You'll regret this. You'll regret this someday. Chapter 11. The Stray Dog. Leo pushed the door open and walked out. Regret? Maybe. But compared to regret, what frightened him more was spending the rest of his life trapped in the shadow of betrayal, living forever inside the pitiful shell of that business partner. After Cynthia was suspended, the investigation team moved in immediately. Without her interference, and with the perfectly timed evidence Marcus provided, the illegal operations behind the Blue Horizon project were quickly exposed. The evidence was undeniable. The massive risks hidden within Zenith Tech's high-stakes investment agreement were completely uncovered, and the enormous potential losses finally surfaced. Julian's side collapsed even harder. Under pressure from all directions, his company officially declared bankruptcy and entered liquidation. His father didn't survive the shock and passed away in the ICU. Julian himself was taken in for investigation on suspicion of financial crimes. Rumor had it that in desperation, he even tried to drag Cynthia down with him, but there wasn't enough evidence. When the wall falls, everyone pushes it. The once glorious rich heir had, in the blink of an eye, become a stray dog with nowhere to go, a prisoner awaiting judgment. Cynthia tried to use the last of her resources to salvage the situation. She even attempted to negotiate terms with Leo, but he refused to see her. Her shares plummeted after the series of scandals, and her influence within the board dropped to almost nothing. Meanwhile, with Marcus's support, Leo quickly stabilized the company from within. Although the stock price suffered through painful turbulence, the foundation of the group remained intact. If anything, after cutting away the rot, Apex began to show signs of new life. Leo officially assumed the role of acting CEO and took full control of the group's operations. No one mentioned Cynthia anymore. Her name and that entire chapter of the past became an unspoken taboo within Apex Group. 3 months later, on a gloomy, rainy afternoon, Leo received a call from the detention center. Julian wanted to see him, so he went. Separated by the thick glass, Julian sat there wearing a prison uniform, unshaven, his eye sockets hollow and sunken in. In just a few months, he seemed to have aged 20 years. The handsome, refined image he once carried was completely gone, leaving behind only lifeless exhaustion. He picked up the phone and looked at Leo. His first words were, "Are you satisfied now?" He let out a dry, raspy wheeze. "My family's finished, my father's dead, and now I'm in here." He tugged at the corner of his mouth, trying to smile, but it looked uglier than crying. Cynthia's ruined too. Her reputation's destroyed. She lost everything. "Leo, you won. You won completely. I told you before, I never wanted to win." Leo's voice remained calm. "This was the road you chose yourselves. The road we chose." Julian suddenly became agitated, his voice rising sharply. "Leo, don't pretend your hands are clean. If you hadn't pushed us so hard, if you hadn't used all those underhanded tactics, how would things have ended up like this? How could Cynthia have?" "I pushed you." Leo cut him off, his voice turning cold. "Did I force Cynthia to announce her engagement at the celebration banquet? Did I force you to covet Apex's resources? Did I force Cynthia into illegal operations? Did I force the two of you to treat marriage like a bargaining chip for interest?" Julian fell silent. He could only glare at Leo viciously while breathing heavily. "Julian, you still don't understand." Leo looked at him as though he were nothing more than a pathetic stranger. "The thing that destroyed you was never me. It was your greed, your schemes, your selfishness, and the way you trampled over 10 years of my sincerity. The two of you brought this upon yourselves." After saying that, Leo put down the phone. Without looking at the twisted expression on Julian's face, he turned and walked away. The cold rain hit his face as he stepped out of the detention center. Thomas walked over and opened an umbrella. "President Vance, back to the company? Take me somewhere else." Leo had Thomas drive to the cemetery in the western outskirts of the city. At the foot of the hill, he bought a bouquet of white chrysanthemums. Alone beneath a black umbrella, he walked slowly up the slippery stone steps. Rain tapped steadily against the umbrella, producing a dull, monotonous sound. The entire world was shrouded in a gray haze, and even the outline of the distant city had become blurred. Chapter 12. A fair ending. At a quiet corner halfway up the mountain, Leo found his mother's grave. In the photograph on the tombstone, she was still young, her smile gentle and warm. He placed the flowers down, crouched beside the grave, and carefully wiped the raindrops from the photo with his sleeve. "Mom, I came to see you." He spoke softly, his voice quickly dissolving into the rain. "I feel like I've done a lot of things. Some of them, I don't even know whether they were right or wrong. But I don't regret them. I'm just a little tired." The rain gradually became heavier, soaking the cuffs of his pants. Leo remained crouched there before his mother's grave, staring at her photograph for a long, long time. By the time he walked back down the mountain, the rain had eased a little. At the entrance of the cemetery, he unexpectedly saw a familiar figure. Cynthia, holding an old umbrella, stood alone by the roadside, seemingly waiting for a car as well. She had lost a frightening amount of weight. Clothes that once fit her perfectly now hung loosely from her frame. Her face carried an unhealthy pallor, and her hollow eyes stared blankly into the curtain of rain ahead. She hadn't noticed him. The car was parked not far away. Thomas looked toward Leo, silently asking for instructions with his eyes. Leo shook his head, signaling for him to wait. Standing beneath the eaves, separated by the endless drizzle, Leo looked at the woman who had once occupied his entire life, yet now felt no different from a stranger. Inside his heart, that barren wasteland seemed to be drowning beneath an even heavier storm, cold and lifeless, without the slightest trace of warmth left. She never obtained the respectable marriage and stable future she wanted, and he never obtained the sincerity and lifelong devotion he had longed for. They had both lost the most precious thing they possessed. Perhaps this was the fairest ending possible for a 10-year entanglement like theirs. After an unknown amount of time, a taxi finally arrived. Cynthia got in and disappeared into the rain. "Let's go." Leo turned and got into the car, closing his eyes as he leaned back against the seat. The engine started, and the car drove away from the cemetery toward the city center, toward the towering Apex Group headquarters that pierced the clouds. There, another long battle awaited him, a battle that belonged to him alone and had only just begun. But he was no longer the same Leo he used to be. The Leo who would throw himself recklessly into love, who would bare his heart and soul for someone else, had already died on the night of the IPO celebration banquet. The one who survived was the ruler of Apex Group, a man whose heart had been forged into steel through betrayal. Outside the car window, the city lights and streets sped backward in blurred streaks. The windshield wipers moved rhythmically, clearing away layer after layer of a world that looked both sharp and hazy at the same time. His phone vibrated once. It was an encrypted message from Marcus. "Mr. Vance, the evaluation report regarding the acquisition of several core patents from Julian's family after their bankruptcy is complete. Their value is considerable. In addition, the European side we contacted earlier is highly interested in cooperation and proposes a video conference next week." Leo picked up his phone and replied simply, "Arrange the meeting. Proceed with the patent acquisition as planned." After sending the message, he turned off the screen. The dark reflections staring back at me were almost no expression at all. The revenge was over. Life, however, continued. It was just that from this moment on, in his world, there would only be business. Chapter 13. A New Dawn. 5 years later, the top-floor office of Apex Group was quiet, save for the soft hum of the city below. Leo stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, a warm cup of coffee in his hand. The black suits and blood-red ties of his past had long been replaced by softer, more relaxed tones. The fierce corporate wars that had once defined his existence were over. Apex Group was now a stable, global titan, and Leo had finally learned to step back and let the machine run itself. His phone buzzed on the desk. It wasn't an encrypted alert from Marcus, nor was it a volatile market report. It was a photo of a wooden playground, accompanied by a simple text. "We tried to build a castle, but someone decided the mud pies were better. Hurry home, Daddy." A genuine smile, lines crinkling gently around his eyes, broke across Leo's face. He put his mug down, grabbed his coat, and walked out of the office, telling his secretary he was done for the day. He didn't need Thomas to drive him anymore. He preferred the quiet solace of driving his own car back to the peaceful suburban neighborhood he now called home. When he pulled into the driveway, the front yard was filled with the sound of laughter. A bright, 5-year-old girl with boundless energy ran toward him, her hands covered in dirt. Leo caught her in his arms, lifting her high into the air despite the mud staining his jacket. "Look, Daddy, we made a garden," she cheered. From the porch, a woman with warm, kind eyes and a gentle laugh walked down to meet them, holding a towel. Her name was Clara. She wasn't a ruthless executive or a strategist. She was an architect who built spaces for people to live in. And over the last 4 years, she had quietly rebuilt the shattered foundation of Leo's heart with nothing but patience, honesty, and unconditional care. She hadn't loved him for his title or his billions. She had loved him for the man who was brave enough to heal. Clara reached up, lightly brushing a stray strand of hair from Leo's forehead. "You're early today," she said, her voice full of peace. "I realized everything that matters is already right here," Leo replied, wrapping his free arm around her waist and pulling her close. He looked at Clara, then down at their daughter, who was already pulling his hand toward the flower beds. The cold, impenetrable steel that betrayal had forged inside his chest had completely melted away, replaced by the warmth of a life built on absolute trust. The past was a distant shadow, completely powerless against the bright, beautiful reality of the present. For the first time in his life, Leo Vance wasn't looking back to see who had left him, nor was he looking forward to the next battle. He was exactly where he belonged,